members, and I'm also going to remind members as well that relevance is subjective. And so I believe that members have their time to ask their questions. I also expect, as I said earlier, that members are going to come back to the point. So if you're interrupting because you don't like something you're hearing, that's too bad. Mr. Brock, you have 6 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Wernick, the focus of my time with you will be on the concept of two-tier justice, two-tier level of justice. But before I get to that, today being March the 19th, when were you invited? When did it come? When were you known that? When did you know that you were going to be invited to this committee?
Oh, I don't know. It was about a week ago, I think.
About a week ago?
I can check my emails, something like that. Yeah.
Okay. And then in the past week or so, what did you do to prepare for this meeting?
Just me and Google search.
Just sorry, what?
Just me and my Google search. I haven't spoken to anybody about this appearance.
No, that wasn't the question. How did you prepare? Did you review, for instance, your 2 transcripts of previous testimony at the Justice Committee?
I read the commissioner's report. I downloaded and read the 2 committee appearances, and I did a search for news articles.
Okay, that's a good start. Now, we know that the ultimate conclusion from the Dion report is that the Prime Minister directly and through senior officials used various means to exert influence over Jody Wilson-Raybould. The authority of the Prime Minister and his officers were used to circumvent, undermine, and ultimately to discredit the decision of the Director of Public Prosecution, as well as the authority of Jody Wilson-Raybould as the Crown's Chief Law Officer. I'm going to quote from her book, Indian in the Cabinet, that she says, "The efforts to pressure me either directly or through Jessica continued from September the 17th and onward. Ultimately, 11 officials from the Prime Minister's office, the Privy Council office, and the Office of the Minister of Finance made attempts. Over that 4-month period, there were approximately 10 phone calls, 10 meetings about SNC-Lavalin, culminating in a phone call I had with the clerk of the Privy Council on December 19th. Now, you didn't know that you were being audio taped, did you?
No.
No. And unlike yourself, because I did review with some great scrutiny your previous transcripts and your evidence from the Justice Committee, you didn't take contemporaneous notes, unlike Jody Wilson-Raybould, did you, of all your interactions with her?
No.
So there was nothing that you could use to refresh your memory in advance of your appearance at Justice Committee 4 years ago, 5 years ago?
Between December and my appearance in February, no.
Yes. Okay. Now, in your opening statements, I don't know if it's your first or second testimony, you talked about two-tier level of justice, but only in relation to the fact that SNC-Lavalin eventually did not receive the DPA and ultimately, as we know, pled guilty to 1 count of fraud. So that's not the focus of the question. The focus is, in my view, there is a perception among Canadians and a perception among numerous members, myself included, that there was a political non-appetite by the RCMP to conduct a thorough investigation. Prior to the Commissioner's attendance, not too long ago, they had roughly close to 4 years of investigating this particular matter. And unlike the Ethics Commissioner, who essentially interviewed 14 witnesses, you being included, the RCMP interviewed 4. Now, I know you've already opined that you're not going to talk about police operations, but given that discrepancy, do you think that there is a disconnect between in terms of how the Ethics Commissioner approached this investigation versus the RCMP?
I think the Ethics Commissioner's mandate given to it by Parliament is about violations of the Conflict of Interest Act. And the RCMP would be looking at a threshold of potential violations of criminal law. So they would be looking at it with a different lens But
But
it
the
is
evidence-
entirely up to the, it's entirely up to the RCMP whether they pursue preliminary investigations, fact-finding, final investigations, or move on to laying of charges. That's their job.
But the evidence is still the same. The evidence, and the RCMP confirmed it, that they relied upon the evidence received from the Ethics Commissioner. The Ethics Commissioner was ultimately stymied and was upset that he was unable to complete a fulsome report due to the actions of the Prime Minister, which is exactly the same rationale the RCMP had used in closing up their investigation because they could not obtain further information from the Prime Minister. Were you aware of that?
So I'm aware that that's what the commissioner wrote in his report. Yes, of course.
Now, there's two elements to any criminal charge. The RCMP were investigating obstruction of justice and intimidation of a justice participant. There's two elements. There has to be an act and there has to be a mental element, an intention to complete the act, known as actus reus, mens rea. I don't want to get into legal complexities, but that is the ultimate test. Did you review the testimony of the RCMP commissioner from a few weeks ago?
No.
All right. Now, I'm going back to some of the evidence that
I'm sorry, Mr. Brown, you get like 10 seconds
I got-
left.
oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.